of the academic world. I was at Brandeis. I had this great fellowship, National Science Foundation Fellowship, expected to be a leader in my field. But I was getting increasingly tired. And the fatigue was increasing, and I went to doctors, and really had a hard time getting a diagnosis. And when I finally got a diagnosis of chronic fatigue, the real trouble was health insurance wouldn't cover what I needed. Wouldn't cover organic food diet, prescribed supplements, acupuncture. So I made the really difficult decision to leave my career path of research ecology and social psychology that I had entered into as part of helping us learn to heal and be in more harmony with the earth. And I went to work as a manager at food co-ops. I was surrounded by all these healthy choices that made it easier to make them. But something I couldn't buy off the shelf, it turned out that I really needed was rest. And that's not a very American concept, to rest. We're workers. Those Puritans worked. And I'd always been a hard worker. But I reluctantly decided I'm going to take some time. And I was very drawn to the desert and to come out to the clean air. But I found that taking some time off, my savings were dwindling, but I wasn't getting energized. I had just discovered that I couldn't push anymore. And I found how bone tired I was. So I made the really difficult decision to apply for disability. And it was so hard because I always had been that hard worker. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. You can do whatever. Motivated. But it wasn't working. And I thought applying for disability would give me that time to rest. I'd get what I needed to heal. I'd get well, go back to work on my life. And then one of the first series of facing a very different reality, and what I call falling off the edge of the known world, was that as I waited for the disability determination, my only income was general assistance, welfare, $173 a month. So the only housing I could afford was living in a storage shed in a campground. You can imagine how that was for my health. And then I couldn't afford to go to a practitioner or anything, but I was diligently doing my acupressure points that I had last been prescribed, and thought, well, at least I can follow, my healthy healing diet. But on the maximum amount of food stamps that I had, I still couldn't get enough to eat, that healthy diet. So I naively asked my caseworker, well, is there some kind of provision, for people who have a medically prescribed diet so that I can eat more? And she said, well, if you're having a hard time getting enough nutrition, I suggest you eat cornflakes because we're fortified with vitamins. So, what can you say to that? And as it was getting colder, as it eventually does in the desert, and I'm driving into town for my health food, I would see the big houses and think, couldn't there be some little place for me? And I would go into the convenience store, filling up my car with gas, and being always hungry, I would see all this waste of energy, all the cigarettes and the alcohol and the highly processed food. But I thought, well, I just have to persist. And once I get a disability, I'll be able to really focus, on healing. I'll have the resources. And then the really interesting experience was, and here I had this great resume, but I had been largely supported by these prestigious fellowships and research assistant work that hadn't been paying into Social Security. So, in the eyes of the system, instead of the promising young person that my resume looked like, I was a deadbeat. And it was very disillusioning. I took my small amount of back payment for the time that I had been waiting for the determination, bought myself a little trailer, I could get out of the storage shed. It was such a delight to put my clothes in drawers. And to have a little kitchen with a little refrigerator instead of my hot plate and such. But then on less than $500 a month, I'd always been a good money manager, but as much as I crunched these numbers, there was no way I could get the things that I needed to heal. So I went into despair. I had always been valued for my skills, my hard work, but here, when I couldn't be productive, I really found what it was to be disposable. that have no value in the outer world. And I really didn't see how I could heal. And my will to live came from thinking, well, at least I could be part of some larger healing. I can help spread information about healthier choices, and that's what kept me alive. But I continued to decline. And my world got smaller and smaller as I became too weak to drive, became homebound, and too exhausted to even go if I could get a ride with someone. And then eventually just spending almost all my time in bed. And in December 1998, I didn't want to die. I still was just able in the moment to look at the birds, have a meaningful conversation, think some new thought, but I was facing the fact that it looked like I was going to die. And I went into intensive meditation to make peace with my life. And in that process, all of a sudden, all this energy started coursing through my body. It was like being on an electric grid, and my heater blew out, and then I would go to turn the light switch, and the light bulb would blow out. And then most of the story I'm saying was this startling psychic opening, where I could just hear people's thoughts. And don't worry, I have learned some psychic boundary skills. We're all safe. But this was such an overwhelming, startling experience. But I somehow knew it was good. I was alive, very alive. And I was reaching out for help. And a healer who came explained that it was an initiation in healing work, and that I would need to do healing work if I wanted to fully heal myself. And I was willing. This was not what I expected to be doing in my life. And coming from that academic research background, one thing I had going for me, I was taught to observe. And this was definitely an anomalous event. This did not fit into my previous paradigm of how the world worked, so I was ready for a major paradigm shift. And I was very open to experiment, try, see what worked. But I thought healing work, I still felt weak, as a newborn kitten. And I thought, well, words. I've always been a good writer. And I started freelancing when I was still there at home, in the trailer out in the desert, for the Star, and then for the Arizona Jewish Post, and eventually other newspapers and magazines. And over time, I've been trained in the modalities that I use now of energy healing and flower essences, which are subtle vibrational remedies. And I work with a wide variety of people, but it's really dear to my heart, the people who've gone through the kind of experience I have, that's a falling off the edge of the world, to go from being valued, some kind of place in the world, to really feeling what it is to be disposable, to not be seen as a person really anymore, often in our society. And I see the roots of that in that Puritan culture where, okay, you're going along, now you make some kind of mistake or something, and then you're in the stocks. You're shamed. It's a punishment mentality. And I look to instead have a learning mentality. And I look at, still within the Christian world, there's a possibility of redemption. In my Jewish tradition, the idea of tikkun olam, the healing of the world, is intertwined with tikkun hanefesh, the healing of the individual soul. And in the spirituality originating from this continent, Native American worldview, it's not a punishment worldview. It's a restorative justice. And illness is seen as a signal for restoring harmony that's not just an individual harmony, but a larger social harmony. So I feel very grateful for this experience that leads me in the work of creating a culture of healing. Thank you.